this. My humour is unbalanced. Consulting the mystic charts, I lack yellow bile. Perchance I did think that yesterday. Hence, I donned my yellow cap to bring the bile to my brain. But it's failing. We must digest appropriately. Before that, we must quaff some ale. I think I need to cook some beef, but that alone will not balance my humours. In fact, it could totally unbalance them. We need to prepare it with a suitable sauce. So I think we're going to cook a medieval roast beef with white garlic sauce and hope the humour is restored. So to commence, before I read it to you, my recipe, that I myself, Manius de Manieris, even I can't pronounce my own name properly, did produce it around about the 14th or 13th century. But I'll read you that hence. But first, we must start the cooking of the beef. The beef is too heavy. The beef cannot be properly digested and will upset the humour even more. Therefore, we must begin by simmering it in water. We must boil it for about 20 to 30 minutes. Here is the joint of beef. Big joint of beef. Greedy bastard I am. Well, and the one. So, that can go in there. And then we're going to boil it. Now this is common practice because the beef needs to be tender. It does not want to be dryish. Thus, we prepare the roast by boiling it first. So I may have put a little more water on that just to cover that, but we will let that, and when that comes to the boil, we will then let that boil for 20 to 30 minutes. Depending on what cut of meat you got, you might even get away with 5, but not the size of that bastard. This recipe for what I am going to cook comes from a book that I myself wrote in the 13th, 14th century, and it's a bit of a cross because I am somewhat of a physician and an astrologist. And so I've written a book, or I wrote a book, that is a cross between a cookbook and a dietic. To ensure that our humours are not unbalanced. Because our humours depend upon our digestion. Now you common folk won't understand this, and I will explain, but first let me read to you my recipe. Spectacles weren't invented about the 15th century, hence I use this magic lens. I was going to wear a pair of old glasses and then I found out I couldn't wear them. Wrong century. That's the 15th century. They used to tie around their head with a bit of string or ribbon. Digressing somewhat. So, possent comedy canes bovine, eum elatia alba et, the eyes go, nusibis et gingerberi albo et alice distemperatis cum aqua carnium et bullitus. Now, for you common folk who not understandeth plain Latin, basically it says beef is prepared also with a white garlic sauce made with walnuts, white ginger and garlic diluted with beef broth and boiled. So it's going to be a simple garlic sauce. Garlic. There's the recipe. I will just prop it here. Find my tools. I've consulted the stars and the planets. They're in alignment. No wonder my humours are unbalanced. And a fellow apothecarian, there is a subtle little joke there. A fellow apothecarian to generously give me a jug of ale. So I will just top it up my horn. So we boil the beef in water because that was what everybody did. But after that, we roast it. Now, roasting, what I, like many of my fellow chefs, failed to say is how you roasted it. Probably spit roasted over fire. Won't go there. But I can't spit roast it over a gas hob. You work with humours are just all over the place. So I'm gonna sort of pan roast it. I did think about shoving it in the oven, but I'm not going to. I want to make you watch it. Now we want to retain it, some of the broth, because if you remember, if you were listening, it does say it uses some of the beef broth to sort of dilute down our sauce. So you're going to want some ginger, quite a lot of it, one whole big clove. You're going to want about 8 or so walnuts, and you're going to want some fresh ginger. Look, it's like a one-legged mandrake. That ain't screaming. Ginger. Okay. And apart from a bit of that beef broth, that's it. Now, we serve it up this, sliced with sauce. What you might want to eat it with is your business. Probably back then it might have been gnocchi or some other form of pasta. But there you go. So, let me just move my humour chart to one side, and then I will tell you a little more about humours, why they must be balanced. For those of you who are paying attention, you will notice the meat looks different. I've turned it. Some of it wasn't quite in the water. So, let's go back to our humours. Now, humours, we have 4 humours. Peter K. Got that sort of humour. And these should all be in harmony. They should be balanced. And it's when they become unbalanced we get disease. And then these diseases are influenced by the quality of what humours we do or don't have. Therefore, it's important that we bring our humours back into balance. Simples. Now, it can be different things that balance our humours. It could be digestion. This is what we're going to be working on. It could be environmental. It could be down to the elements, fire, water, so on, that cause an imbalance in our humours. basically anything you think of can upset your humours. So, Hippocrates came up, or he was the one who said, this is our four humours: black bile, yellow bile, blood and phlegm. And each one of them corresponds to one of your, people's temperament. So, for instance, someone who's too fiery, angry and so on may have an excess of a particular humour. I'll tell you which one's in a minute. And so on. So not only does it affect whether we're ill, excuse me, it also affects our temperament. So, blood. Now, blood is the source of all energy for the body and the soul. Blood is good for the body and soul. And blood is made up of small portions of all the other three humours in the correct quantities. Hence, they get unbalanced. The blood gets unbalanced. Get it? Now, this is starting to come up to a boil, so I'm going to reduce the heat. And using powers of astrology, I've managed to obtain an alchemy, but far too complicated for you. I've managed to acquire a thing from the future, an egg. And this egg can telleth time. So I'm going to set this egg for 20 minutes of the hour. So while our beef is boiling, I'm going to take the bulb of garlic-ish, and we're going to separate it out and we're going to peel it. We will be chopping it finely, but I'm going to get all the peeling done first. So people who have an excess of blood are very sanguine, they're enthusiastic, they're active, they're social people. Now, I currently lack enough yellow bile. Now, yellow bile is associated with a colic nature. People are ambitious. Those with excessive yellow bile, you see, they're decisive, but they can be aggressive and short-tempered because yellow bile is associated with fire. Oops. Stop sticking to the bloody skin, you little shit. Perhaps my yellow bile is beginning to return. Because an excess of yellow bile can lead to increase of anger. So, black bile. Now, black bile is of a melancholy nature. And in fact, the word melancholy comes from the Greek word that meant black bile. But black bile in excess, or rather depression, can lead to an excess of unnatural black bile being secreted by the spleen. Not good. And then there's phlegm. Now, phlegm isn't what we think of as phlegm today. Phlegm was a term used in my time for basically sort of those sort of white or colourless secretions such as pus, mucus, saliva, sweat and semen. Phlegm is also highly connected to the brain. Now the reason that was thought was because when one dissecteth the corpse, the colour of the brain in a way sort of resembled a lot of these phlegm type fluids. Thus it became associated with brain. People who have excess of phlegm are very phlegmatic. They're quite reserved, quiet. So, there's your 4 humours. I'm going to get them peeled. Then I'm going to tell you about the resulting imbalance. And the clocketh still ticketh, although I might have to turn it up the heateth a bit. My garlic peeledeth. So now I take my ginger and we're just going to peel it. Now, this is fresh ginger, and usually I keep my ginger in the freezer, the ice box. However, it does tend to make the ginger go a little bit soggy when you remove it from the freezer and let it thaw out. Hence I normally just grate it, but we don't want it like that. I suppose we could use it like that, but we ain't gonna. So I'm just going to peel off this rather large lump of ginger, and then that too will need to be finely chopped. What I might do, just chop that there like that, because it'd be easy to peel that bit. Now, I said to you about this balance of humours. Now, it is your digestion that controls the humours within your body. It can be influenced by other things, like I've said, but if your digestion is not proper, it results in improper production of humours, because humours are produced from your digestive system. Well-known fact. It was in Apothecary for You, volume 75, I think it was. Now, if the humour production is not correct, then it will affect your organs, and if your organs don't function correctly, that too will affect your humour production. So thus, we need to consider the food to ensure proper digestion, to ensure proper humour production, and therefore get a proper balance in it. So, nasty chap there, isn't there? Shrunk his head and fit it in a jar. I will study it later. Planet's still in alignment, where they would be. They don't move that fucking quick, do they? Well, they do, but not on that scale. Right, just going to tidy and we'll start chopping. And we have about 5 minutes left of the boiling. I'm now going to finely chop up our garlic, ginger. Now, it's all going to go in there. Note this, a fallen star. And this mystic rock that came from the fallen star. Actually, come out of rock, but play along. It's been crafted so it has mystic powers. The mortar and pestle, pound my foods, all to help with these humours. So, I want to try and get it as fine as possible, just to make life easier when we pound it in there. So I'm just chopping this finely, as it were. I suppose if I used my frozen one and grated it, could have done that, but I think it wouldn't be quite as good as having fresh ginger. So, if my humours are amiss, why am I having beef, which is far too heavy and hard for such as I, who is noble and wise? Beef is not the meat for the nobility. Beef is for the manual worker, the peasant. But we are going to balance it by adding a sauce. Now, you've got to be careful with your sauces, because you can get a bit carried away, and an excess of sauce, as in S-A-U-C-E, can cause lots of harm. It's a bit like I'm trying to think of an example, but it's like taking a medicine when you don't really need it, and therefore it can result in you being ill with the thing that you take the medicine for that you weren't actually ill with, but you now are ill, or so they believe anyway. And such is it with sauces. Whereas a proper sauce applied correctly, in the correct quantity, and of the correct humour, as it were, is beneficial, and excess can be completely the opposite. Hence, it is necessary to balance the beef with the correct amount of sauce. Now, to balance beef, we need something a bit fiery. Hence, ginger and garlic. Now, garlic, to be honest, again, is not really for the nobility. Garlic is a common herb, but you know what I mean, for the poor. But in this case, its use is warranted. So, there's my ginger finely chopped. I'm now going to swappeth the bowl. What is that? Horrendous noise coming from the mystic egg from the future. I think it means I've got to stop boiling that. So, I have removed the boiled meat and place it upon the platter. A skillet. And I'm going to roast it on that in a minute. Like I say, you could spit roast it, shove it in the oven or whatever, I'll do it on that in a minute. But before I do that, before I discard most of that, avoiding the sort of scummy bits, I want to retain some of that beef broth. I mean, for you peasants, I think I should just serve you this. And you can count yourself lucky that you have such nourishment. I will be using it, unless I just spill it down the side in a minute and burn me. That's getting a bit wound, that bowl. I'll be using this to water down my broth. So, I'm going to get rid of that, just put that to one side. Now, if you've got lots of slaves, and I haven't, I may have a washing and ironing slave, but she doesn't do any of the kitchen duties. And therefore, rather than me getting another little saucepan to cook my sauce in, I'm going to put it in that. So, let me just move my sauce over there. Actually, I'm going to move it over there. I'll get rid of it in a minute, but so I've been chopping up the garlic. Okay, so the ginger's chopped, the garlic's almost chopped, the walnuts already in bits anyway, and so we're almost ready to start preparing the sauce. Now the sauce, we can prepare it, but it needs to be cooked for a few minutes. But depending on how you want your sauce to balance the fieriness or lack of the humours, depends how long you cook it for. We'll come to that in a minute. So, I'm going to carry on chopping it up. Garlic, like I say, it's all going in there anyway and being pounded the crap out of, but might help if we just chop it up a bit to begin with. So, there we go. I'm going to put my garlic into there. and I'm just going to crush it a little bit more. So I said to you, like, you know, beef difficult to digest. Any meat that is difficult to digest requires a sauce. Now, a good friend of mine, although I think he actually predated me by quite a few centuries, by the way, the meat is now on for roasting, and I will be regularly rotating it as the planets rotate the sun, although I'm not sure if actually anybody says that yet. So you need a sauce, and as I was saying, a good friend of mine wrote a book called The Tractatus de Modo Preparandi et Contitendo Omnia Ciberi et Potus, where he stated that meats that are difficult to digest require a sauce that stimulates the stomach. And that's exactly why we're using garlic and ginger, and you could use pepper or hot spices to get the fire going in our stomach to start breaking down this meat. So we need basically a hot sauce. So in goes my ginger, and I'm now roll in there, and we're now just going to start grinding that in as well. Now, we're going to cook this sauce, and we're going to dilute it down with some of that broth. But like I said, depending on how much you cook it, will influence the garlic. Better turn that down a bit. The longer we cook it, the more we attenuate the flavour of the garlic. Thus it loses some of its fieriness, and therefore may not fire up the stomach appropriately to digest that. But if you sort of sacks of shallot, don't like it too garlicky, you cook it for longer. Alright? Now, final thing we're going to put in there is our walnuts. And now we're just going to continue to pound these all together in my mystic fallen starstone until we've got them all nicely mashed together. You may have to consult my chart skin. Although to be honest, it tells me bugger all about food. I'm rotating my meat. It's a right slippery little fucker, I tell you. Trying to cook it all over. This time the little bastard ain't going to turn. It's probably handy with a fork, wouldn't it? So really, this depends on how much you like your meat cooked. Okay, whether you like it well done or rare. We prefer it a little bit on the rare side. And what I will do in a moment, I will check the internal temperature, although I don't think it's there yet anyway, because I can see blood of 4 humans being emitted from the edge of the meat. That doesn't mean to say it's undercooked yet, but you might just want to check that it is actually cooked inside, and I'm going to get a fork and I'm going to turn it on the end. So I have pounded this together, and I'm just going to add a little bit. I'm using a cup measure or quart cup or something like that, simply because it's easier to spoon that in there. Now I may well add more. I definitely will add more later, although this sauce wants to be quite thick. Okay, so I'm just going to add some of that broth, carry on making sure this is all pounded together, and I'm going to get that rotated. think my hat has done the trick and raised the yellow bile to my brain, hence I'm getting a bit fiery, something yellow. Now, check my chart. I'm correct in my assumption. Check it out. Anyway, I'm now going to scrape from my Mystic Stone, Starstone, into this saucepan. Like I say, you can use a small saucepan if you've got one. Crank more washing up. You've got slaves. Who gives a shit? I haven't. So I'm just going to rinse that with a little more of the broth, and I will probably add a little bit more broth. Also to top it up, the ale from this, he must be an alchemist, this apothecary, because it never seems to empty. Much as I keep topping up my horn, never seems to go down. So, might just add a little bit more broth. Like I said, this must be quite a thick sauce. And remember, we're not doing like we might do with some sauces, which is boil it away to reduce it down. We want it to be quite a thick sauce. So we're just waiting and getting that beef cooked sufficiently. Still a bit cold in the centre. I stabbeth it with my futuristic thermometer, and the butter's now just fallen off. The meat is now cooking, so it is rare inside. So we're going to remove it from the heat and allow it just to rest for 10 minutes or so before we slice it. Okay, and so in the meantime, actually, the wife, who is full of good humour at the moment, messaged me earlier through the ether, and said, "Our humour needs another beer." I think she thinks she's being humorous, but she's still sedating the yellow bile by, actually no, she's trying to increase it. She's in a bloody hot bath. Plus she has her bath hot. So I'm just going to let that resteth a bit, and then when Madam is forsooth from the bathing room, we'll cook our sauce, because like I said, we don't want to cook it for too long, not unless you want to lose the fire of the garlic and ginger. Now we're just going to slice our meat. And then I have a platter here to lay it uponst. So I did check the temperature. It is rare in the middle, but it did reach the required temperature. And then it will be ready for the sauce. So that's going to go in there. We can see there it's nice and rare. Like I say, if you don't like it rare, cook it for longer. That's up to you. And then we will dress it with the sauce when we've cooked it. So the wife has finished anointing herself with lush oils and spices and herbs. Lush. and has descended and now demands fodder. Obviously beer was not enough to satisfy her humour. So, my meat is sliced. Ooh, a lot of blood smearing around in there. And so now, like I say, we just want to cook this for a couple of minutes, 2 to 3 minutes at most. The longer you cook it, the less the force of the garlic. And we must have balance in the force, Luke. So if you are one soft one who doesn't liketh the garlic intensity, cook it a bit longer. So this is going to take a little bit longer because it's obviously a cast iron pan. So we're just going to bring that up and then cook that a couple of minutes, and then pour it over the sauce, over the meat, and whether it is past the witching hour, which it ain't, but perhaps we'll just pretend it is, my magic apothecary jug has suddenly emptied, and there is no more. I'll have to replenish my horn with some other sustenance. So, there we go. There you go. So, a 13th to 14th century roast of beef with a white garlic. And it's quite white. When you first start chucking in them walnuts, you think, how the bloody hell's it going to be white? But even though, obviously, it's got brown on the outside of the walnuts, it is whitish, isn't it? I suppose you might argue it's a little bit like adding phlegm. That's enough to put you off, isn't it? We're now just going to take that sauce and spread it over the top of the meat, which I know you can't quite see at the minute. So it's like I said, quite a thick sauce. It's not meant to be like a runny sauce, like gravy. And the fire from this should attenuate the meat and help induce the fire in the stomach to digest it properly. So I'm going to take that little end bit of beef, and I'm going to take some of that sauce and put it on there. And let's try it out. Probably picked a bloody tough bit now. That sauce is certainly potent. Garlic is the overpowering part of it, but it is a white garlic sauce. We are getting the ginger, other than perhaps a bit of a nuttyish texture. Actually, I don't know, I'm getting the walnuts as well. But definitely the overwhelming flavour of that sauce is the garlic. So there you have your 13th, 14th century medieval beef roasted with a white garlic sauce. Now I better serve it up to the ladyship.